So, good afternoon everybody and welcome to your guide to auto enrolment. Thank you very much for taking the time, and I know on a busy schedule, to attend today's event. Hopefully you'll find it useful, and hopefully at the end of the presentation you'll have a clear understanding of what's required for auto enrolment and responsibility within it. Before I start, I'd just like to thank Clear Vision for hosting the event today for us, and I know that Clear Vision will be in touch over the next few days just to see how things went. But again, just thanks very much for their time and their trouble for setting this up for us. So firstly, I'd just like to say, as I said to you, welcome and thank you for joining. My name is Mark Heil and I represent a company called the Workplace Advice Group, and we specialise in setting up and facilitating auto enrolment schemes throughout the UK. What I'd like to do is just share with you an agenda that I feel that will help me keep on track to cover off, I think, the relevant areas that we need to discuss today. And as you can see from there, there's probably 4 key areas that I want to cover off. Obviously, why it's happening, what are the costs involved in auto enrolment, what happens, unfortunately, if a business doesn't comply, and how Workplace Advice Group can help. I will allow, we have the facility to ask any questions, and that will be through the box that you should be seeing on your screen. And if you put a question there, I will try and endeavour to answer as we go along. But if we move on and I've not covered it off, I will look to cover it off at the end. Hope that's okay for everybody. So let's have a look at it. Well, the reality is that auto enrolment is a pension law that came into place back in 2012 now, and requires every employer in the UK, as I'm sure you're aware, to facilitate a savings for retirement for their employees. As the screen says, this isn't a political agenda, it's economic, and it's a real challenge to the UK. It's been set up with a number of pension departments, and they're all working really closely together. As you can see, Department of Work and Pensions, Office of Fair Trading, and the Pension Regulator. They are obviously working really closely together to ensure that every business has the support and help they need to ensure that this is successfully enrolled. As you can see, we've had a number of campaigns from the regulator, and the first one was We're All In, and it was based basically on large companies, 50+ employees. We've moved on a little bit then, and on your right hand side now, there's this wonderful new campaign that's out there that says don't ignore it, and I believe the logo there is called Worky, and Worky is to encourage us all to ensure that we meet our regulatory responsibilities. So a little bit of background. So when did this process start? When was it really came to fruition? Well, it actually started some back in the early 2005, 2006, and was put into a Pension Act in 2008, and actually legislation came live in 2011. And the reality is that all employees have a new legal duty from that date. The staging dates for automatic enrolment are being rolled in over 6 years, so it's a phasing in process over a 6-year period, and it's going to affect in the region of 1.8 million employers and 15 million UK workers who didn't have or would not have had access to save for their retirement through their employer. So it's a massive task that's been undertaken, and as I say, the government are fully committed to see this through. So why is it happening? Well, I think we're probably all aware of what's happening out there as far as the state provision that we have, and it also points out that in many instances we're living longer in the UK. I know it's geographical, and some people live longer in certain parts of the country, but on average, so the stats tell us that we're going to be looking to live in the region of 30 years into retirement. The bad news is, as we've already probably mentioned, is we're not saving for our retirement. As a nation, we've had decades of decline of saving towards our retirement. So this is the regulator, the government's way of empowering businesses and employees to ensure that they do start to save towards retirement and have the opportunity wherever they may work. The slide's quite interesting for me, because if we look at the changes in working age and how it's actually changed in society, as we can see, in 1901 we had 10 people who were of a working age, and we had 1 person who was actually retired. By 2050, which isn't too far away, the demographics have changed incredibly. There's going to be 2 people working or a working age to 1 retiree. So as you can see quite clearly from there, in an ageing population, society is getting older, and we need to do something about that, because if we just rely on the state provision, then that 20, 30 years into retirement will possibly not be a pleasant time for most UK workers. So let's have a look at the key steps that we feel are required in order to successfully, first and foremost, to prepare, plan and implement auto-enrolment, and then these 5 key stages post auto-enrolment to ensure that your business, your scheme, both meets the regulatory responsibilities that you have to complete, but also to ensure that your staff, the key to your business, understand what's happening, when it's happening, and what their options are as well. So the first one is you do need to understand when your staging date is, and also understand what your options are on staging date. I'll cover off options with regard to bringing staging date forward or even postponing a little bit later in the presentation. The second point on there is we need to ensure that there is a person within the business who's been nominated as the key point of contact. Now, what we mean by a key point of contact is someone in the business that can actually make a decision, someone who actually would be able to make a decision and see it through. Developing initial plans, that looks different for different people. Again, today it may be the first time that you've actually considered what your plans are and how you're going to get to the point where you've actually successfully staged and you're running your auto-enrolment scheme. Your initial plan will have many facets to it, and I believe the first part there is to see how this is going to work and what the costs are going to be for your business, because there are implicit costs that you will have to consider, and then there may be other costs that at the moment you've not considered and you may need to do so. Knowing your workforce is vital, and what I would say at this point is that if you have 1 person or 10 people on your payroll who are an employee, then you do need to consider them for auto-enrolment. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you will be automatically enrolling those individuals, but you need to consider them. You would also need to consider, a part of your developing initial plan, when you choose a provider, if you do this yourself or you use a third party to do it for you, you will have to ensure that that provider has a facility to enrol or to accept every individual into the pension scheme. So if the provider limits access to the scheme, it may not be the right scheme for you. So you do need to do your due diligence and ensure that the provider that you ultimately choose to run your scheme allows all of your workforce to be part of the scheme. Process and software. This is quite key as well, because we've got to ensure, because it is a process-driven process that we're going to be running through, or that you're going to be running through, and you need to ensure whether you do this in-house yourself, which we find many small micro SMEs run in-house payroll. It may be when you start looking at your initial plans and looking at what's needed that you may decide that you need to outsource your payroll. So today, if you've not already thought about that, is a good time to do that sense check on your payroll. Now, a number of, as I say to you, small businesses either do it in-house or use basic tools payroll that HMRC provide. If that's the case, then you may need, as I say, to find a situation. You may be in a situation whereby your auto-enrolment has to be done manually, and that would be a very laborious process and potentially cause you issues in regard to compliance. So please have a think about who you currently use for your payroll, and take time to consider if you need to then think about maybe getting a second opinion on your payroll, and maybe having a look at what other software providers or indeed accountants payroll can provide for you. Once we've looked at that, then we need to review if we have any existing pension arrangements within the business. So what I mean by that, a lot of legacy businesses have pensions with maybe 1 employee in there, something that was set under a stakeholder and someone took advantage of there. So what I would say on that is, if you currently have a pension provider within your business, if you have any pension provision that you facilitate on behalf of any of your employees, you do need to review that. And by reviewing that, you'll need to understand what are the scheme rules. Because if you want to keep it, to continue with it under auto-enrolment, you may need to adapt the scheme, or indeed you may have to run 2 separate pension schemes. Now, most businesses that we speak to obviously there's an additional work involved in auto-enrolment. So what they're trying to do is have a look at that and say that if they have an existing pension arrangement, can that be embedded in the new arrangement, so they're not running two schemes. Communication to staff, absolutely vital. It's absolutely vital that your staff fully understand where we are, where they are in the process, what's going to happen to them, because most of your staff will need to make a decision. Now, the decision may be that they will be auto-enrolled and they wish to consider opting out. I'll cover off what that looks like a little bit later in the presentation. Or it may be they need to consider whether they would like to enroll. So they may be looking to you for help and advice to make that decision. Now, what you must be very wary of, that you don't give advice. It's your responsibility. You have to set a scheme up. Your responsibility to find the right pension provider. It's your responsibility to facilitate successful enrolment, but you cannot give advice. So if an individual comes to you and approaches you looking for advice, whether it's the right thing to do or not, you mustn't give that advice, because potentially it could be deemed that you was influencing an individual to opt out. So just to recap on the 7 stages is, as we've said, know your staging date. And if you currently don't know your staging date, if you log into the regulator's website and just put in, or if you Googled know my staging date and you have your PAYE reference number, then you will be able to get an instant confirmation of when your staging date is. Nominator contact is really important. You may choose to nominate one individual, you may choose 2. Today is about looking at initial plans or what you've already done so far. Assess your workforce, know what it's going to look like, know what the costs involved are going to be. Have a look at how it's going to work, because the contributions are going to be phased in, and again I will cover that off later in the presentation, and you need to understand what the impact is going to be on your business with the costs involved there. Process and software, as I say, is absolutely key, because it is a process driven, and do remember that Clear Vision do have a fantastic payroll software provided, and they do provide a fantastic opportunity for auto-enrollment if that's something you've not already considered. Review existing pensions. As we said earlier, if you do have existing pension, you do need to review them and to check if they're auto-enrollment compliant. Communications to staff, as I say again, we firmly believe that communications to staff is vital in the process, not only for their understanding, but also for a business perspective, to know that they have done the right thing for their individuals. Moving on from your staging date, so whenever you've actually hit your staging date, then it's your responsibility to enroll eligible job holders. That's why the process and software we talked about earlier is vital, because the processes and software has to be right, it has to be audited, and it has to be seen that the right contributions and the right deductions are being made, whether you pay someone weekly, fortnightly, 4 weekly or monthly. It has to be spot on. Registration is sometimes called compliance declaration. That is when your responsibility to the regulator is to ensure that you complete your registration or your compliance documentation and tell the regulator who was on payroll at your staging date, who did you automatically enroll, which other individuals within the business joined the scheme, if that was correct, any other workers within your business. You also have to confirm who the provider is, and also if you had any opt-outs. So if anybody was automatically enrolled, and I'll cover off what the criteria is for that shortly, then you have to make sure that they have the right to opt out, and you record that to the regulator. We found so far that the majority of fines that have been levied by the regulator, the majority of issues that have come up is around the registration process, where people have incorrectly or incorrectly registered with the regulator the wrong information. Keeping records, again, is vital. That is something that you will have to do. Again, if you have the right process and software, then you will be able to record that, and it will be documented by your payroll or your accountancy practice who's currently doing that. Ongoing responsibilities around ensuring that your staff, future staff, existing staff, are fully informed at all times of any changes in legislation, any changes to changes in contributions, and you also have to do, after you've done your registration on an annual basis, what they call a governance of the scheme. So it's your responsibility to ensure that on an ongoing basis that you provide governance for that scheme, and to ensure that it will still keeps and is in line with the rules around automatic enrolment. Because unfortunately, some providers in the market set up auto enrolment compliance schemes, and then for commercial reasons, they change their stance. So you would need to make sure and to keep a close eye that on an annual basis, your scheme is still fit and proper and meets all the regulator requirements. So as you can probably see in recap there, there's a lot of work to do, there's a lot of planning to do, and there's a lot of ongoing responsibility that as a business principal, as an individual or a company that employs people, you will have to do that. So going on to your staging date, as I say, the staging dates are set by regulation and are set by your number of employees that you had as of the 5th of April 2012. And as we can see from there, the staging dates, if we look at anyone who has employees of 49 and below, goes from the 1st of June 15 to April 17. So again, probably the most of the people I'm talking to on the webinar today are in that situation. So they will be staging between now and sometime in 2017. Don't be misled by April 17. That was only a guide. We're certainly speaking to people now who've got their staging date, and it's June or July 17. So again, I think that process will continue as new business startups and business models change somewhere into early 2018. We've mentioned already about ensuring you nominate the primary points of contact and any additional contacts you may choose to do. Typically that may be a professional advisor or your accountant, because obviously if your accountant or people who do your payroll have got a login to Automatic, they will be copied into the information, and any changes that they need to make you aware of, they can do so at the same time. Let's have a look about knowing your workforce. So the regulator says there are 3 people or 3 job holders, if you like, that either are entitled, eligible or non-eligible. So let's have a look at the first. If anybody within your practice is aged 22 up to state pensionable age, now that's a moving feast as we know, because it's no longer 60 or 65, so we need to be aware of people who are up to state pensionable age, obviously working in the UK, and earning the equivalent of 10,000 per annum. Now what I point out here is that's slightly misleading because, excuse me, when you have to do your assessment of your workers, then the assessment is made on their pay, on the pay reference period. An example of that would be if, for instance, somebody within your practice earns £833 per month, then they will be a qualified eligible job holder. So they will need to ensure that, you will need to ensure that they've been automatically enrolled. Now, if you have in your practice whereby somebody may work for only part of the year and they may not earn 10,000 on an annual basis, because they've earned 833 in that pay reference period, then you will need to enroll them into the scheme. Moving on to a non-eligible job holder, that's someone, as you can see, who's aged between 16 or 21, or past state pensionable age but up to the age of 74, earning above 10,000, or same age range 16 to 74 but earning between 5,824 but below the 10,000 limit that we talked about. What I would say there is that you may find that you have a number of people in your practice or in your business that fall into that category. If you do, then they can request to join the scheme from your staging date or any date from that point. If they choose to join, you have to enroll them in the scheme and you will need to make a contribution on your behalf. The contribution you make will be set by statute, and I'll talk about what the minimums are, but you do have to make a contribution, the same as you would if they were automatically enrolled. If we move on to an entitled worker, and again, a lot of businesses that we've set auto enrolment schemes up for have a number of these individuals within the scheme. The key point to take from this is that if they earn below 5,824 a year, £112 a week, then they're entitled to join the pension scheme. You have to facilitate joining, you have to facilitate enrolling them into the scheme. However, it's the business principal's choice whether a contribution is made from the business or not. So just to recap, eligible job holders, they join, you have to make a contribution. Non-eligible, if they choose, you have to make a contribution. Entitled worker, if they choose, you have the choice whether you want to make a contribution or not. Hopefully that's covered off, and obviously a short period of time. We could talk a lot more about this, but I am conscious that obviously we have a little bit more to go through. But those are the key elements, if you like, of what you need to ensure when you're doing your assessment. And as I said to you earlier, if you're doing this yourself, this will be something that you can get horribly wrong. It is a time, if that's the case, to maybe consider using a payroll bureau or an accountant similar to Clear Vision, etc. So, process of software, well, again, if you do this yourself, you may be using one of the leading lights, if you like, on who provide software, and I've just put some of the names up on there. We're not lying to any of those providers. We just know that working in this industry, working in the auto enrolment world, where we currently have around about 2,000 schemes that we're currently managing, if we come across a business that needs our help and support and they use one of these payroll providers, as in I think it says that Iris, then you'll find that you will have the necessary equipment to run auto enrolment. The auto enrolment process, we said earlier, is about deducting and paying contributions on behalf of staff, monitoring ages, handling requests, and issuing statutory letters of communication. You have to do that initially, but you also will have to do that on a regular basis if you have new people that come into your business. So those statutory communication letters, as I say, will need to be issued prior to your auto enrolment date, so your existing staff. But moving forward, you will also need to do that for any new joiners within your business. So we talked about reviewing pension arrangements, and that's basically the guide that the regulator sets out to say, because your existing scheme may not meet auto enrolment rules, that doesn't mean to say that you can't continue offering that scheme to your existing members. But what you would have to do is offer any new members an auto enrolment scheme. So again, a lot of businesses that we speak to do have a hybrid scheme in effect, whereby they continue with the scheme they've got, but they've also set up an auto enrolment scheme for any new employees. Or alternatively, some businesses have decided to obviously cease with their existing scheme and enroll everybody into the new scheme. Communication to staff, it's a little bit woolly in our opinion, what you have to do. The minimum you have to do is to issue the statutory communication letter, and the regulator says, as you can see from the screen, it's the employer's duty to provide the right information to the right individual at the right time. He said that you need to raise general awareness amongst your workforce. That means that you need to make them aware of what's happening. It doesn't mean that you will be able to give advice, because as we said earlier, this is about bringing auto enrolment into the workplace, but it's not about you advising your staff whether it's the right or the wrong thing to do. And sometimes that area gets a little bit muddy. We firmly believe that a staff presentation is the right way to communicate this to staff, alongside obviously the statutory letter. The businesses that we work alongside, it's part of our commitment to each business that we will do a presentation to all staff at the time prior to auto enrolment, so they have a full understanding and have a clear message and a clear understanding of what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. From your staging date, now this is where you have a number of options, and on your staging date you can issue what they call postponement. You can also bring your staging date forward. So if for a business reason that you wanted to bring your staging date forward, so if you were, example, you had a staging date of January 17, but you wanted to bring that forward to November 17 or even December, 16, because it fits in with your business model, because it's a busy period in your schedule, or indeed it matches up with your end of your tax year, you can do that. So you can bring your staging date forward. What you can't do, you cannot delay your staging date. You have to stage at the date you've been given or earlier if it suits you as a business. What you can do, you can actually use something called postponement. Postponement allows you, if you choose to do so, to postpone contributions, not the scheme, contributions for a maximum of 3 months. So you could, in the example given earlier, if you were staging on the 1st of January, you could, as long as you communicated this to your staff, postpone contributions for up to a maximum of 3 months. So On your staging date, you need to assess and enrol all your staff, and that would be your eligible staff. However, if you've had a notice from one of your non-eligible or your entitled staff, then you will also need to enrol them into the scheme. Once you've enrolled into the scheme, then obviously there is the opting out that they can choose. Now, opting out I will cover off in the next slide, but it is important that, as I say, there are timescales associated with opting out, and your staff clearly need to understand what those are. And as we said earlier, if you've got someone joining at a later date, then you still need to communicate and explain to them when the process or when they're going to be joining the scheme. 1 point of postponement, as we said earlier, is up to 3 months from your staging date. You must write to your staff within 6 weeks of staging, which can be quite useful for some businesses. And where we find a lot of businesses use postponement is when you get a new starter. So if you've got someone who joins your business and they're on a probationary period, you may choose to ensure that postponement is written in the scheme rules, that individual or individuals will not be accessing the pension scheme until that postponement date or that probationary date is completed. But as I said to you earlier, that can only be for a maximum of 3 months. Registration, we talked about this earlier, and this is where you have a legal duty to complete a declaration of compliance to the regulator that provides the information that the regulator wanted. If that's not completed correctly or it's not completed timely, then there may be an enforcement action by the regulator. As you can see from there, you have up to a maximum of 5 months from your staging date in which to complete that. Typically, if you stage and begin your scheme on your date of staging, you may do that maybe 3 months after that date, because you need to have the information and to check the information is correct, both from your payroll, both from your systems and your controls, to ensure that the process has been embedded correctly and you have the right information before you sign that off to the regulator. Again, for the businesses we work alongside, that is something that we take responsibility for. Communication staff, we said this earlier, I think it's vital that every member of staff fully understands what their options are. What you wouldn't want to do is to find at some stage in the future a member of staff who maybe have left your business, left your practice, decided that they've been approached, let's say, by a claim management company, and the claim management company inadvertently said, well, did you get auto-enrolled? Did you understand what you were doing? Are you happy with what happened? If they say no, unfortunately, we believe that there will be businesses out there that will look to exploit auto-enrollment for their own gains and set up if you like, a mis-selling culture on the back of auto-enrollment. So if you communicate to your staff correctly, if you provide them the right information at the right time, they fully understand what's going on, then hopefully that will mitigate that risk. But I firmly believe, or we firmly believe, that that is a potential that's going to happen. As PPI, as we know, has been around for many years, as that seems to be dwindling by 2018, 2019, I firmly believe that some of these claim management companies will look to auto-enrollment as a way of generating a new income stream for them. So please, if you're going to do this yourself, please ensure that you do everything that you need to do in the right manner. Again, just thinking about how this is going to work, it's important that your existing documentation is up to date, that your contracts of employment and your handbooks is up to date. If you feel that you would like to review that, please let us know, and we'll be more than happy to provide a review of that, of your documentation. Or if you currently have an HR professional who does that either in-house or externally, just double check that you've got everything there that you need to do so, to ensure that, as I say, everything is watertight and everybody understands what is happening and when it's happening. Let's have a look at your ongoing responsibilities. And what I mean by ongoing responsibilities, we're looking at the framework for the contributions, because this is key to your business. There are a number of options. We've said earlier that you have to set up a scheme for your staff. You have to be compliant. You have to choose a scheme. The choice that you have is the contributions. You can choose what they call tiering. Now, there's different tiers that you can choose to set up your scheme. Okay. Now, that may be, you may decide to set up your scheme where everybody has the same contribution. You may choose that you have different contributions for different members of staff, or indeed, you may have different contributions for different people within your organisation. But let's have a look what the legal are the minimum contributions, if you like, that you must apply from your staging date. So from any day from your staging date till April 2018, there must be a minimum of 1% contribution from the employer. So there's got to be a minimum of 1% from the employer. There must be at least 2% in total. So how that would work is 1% from the employer and 1% from the employee. When we move into the next phase, which is beginning of tax year 2018 to the end of the tax year, then the contributions increase, and an employer must then contribute a minimum of 2%, and employee must contribute a minimum of 3%, giving a total of 5%. Once we move into the tax year April 2019, the figures change again, and the employer must contribute a minimum of 3%, and the employee must contribute, if they wish to remain in the scheme, a minimum of 5%. Now that's not taken into account if you set your scheme up on a net pay arrangement or automatic arrangement, because if you do that, obviously the contributions from your staff, if you like, from the employees, will be slightly less than that, 0.8, 2.6 and 4%, because of the tax relief that is available for every individual member of the scheme. As I said earlier, you can choose to potentially cost contain, and some of the cost containments that you may wish to consider is using qualified earnings as your route or your method of contribution. And in simplistic terms, what qualifying earning does, it ensures that it will only be the middle band of someone's earnings that will count towards the cost of contribution. An example would be that if someone was earning, let's say, 16,000 per annum for ease, then the first 5,824, the first 5,824 of contributions would not count. So the employer and the employee would be basing their contribution on just over 10,000. So it would be 1% of the 10,000 rather than 1% of the 16,000. Also, it's capped. So the contribution is capped at 43,000. So again, if within the business, within the practice, you have individuals that earn more than 43,000 and you wish to cost contain the contributions, because we're talking 1%, 2% and then 3% going forward, you may choose to use qualified earnings, because the contributions, as I say, will cease at 43,000. Now, having said that, that's the responsibility of yourselves as business principals. If an individual wishes to pay additional contributions on top, that's absolutely fine. An individual can choose to pay whatever they wish into the scheme, and if they choose to do that, then again, as long as they put that in writing to you, confirm that that's what you want to do, then your responsibility to ensure that you facilitate that additional contribution. What you don't have to do, and again, this is quite often asked in these kinds of events, is do we have to match that contribution? Absolutely not. The employer's responsibility, as we said there, is either 1%, 2% or 3%. Now, designing the scheme is really important, and again, the businesses we work alongside, we do a full analysis of payroll, we do a full analysis of the business, and then we present funding options or contribution options to the business before the scheme is set up. Now, as I said to you earlier, you can change the contribution levels at your discretion, and you can have different, if you like, working groups for different individuals within the business, if that suits, either for, and some businesses look at this as a retention tool, so they need to pay the additional contribution to retain staff, and equally importantly, you may see it as a recruitment tool, whereby you would need to recruit someone into your business. You're not stuck with what the regulator says you must do. You can set your own bar, if you like. That's just a quick look at pay reference periods. As I say, this is something that your accounts or your payroll bureau would look at for you, and that's when they would assess what the lower earnings and upper earnings, if you chose to use the qualified earnings route. So that's just to give you a quick flavour of how that looked like. And as I say, the lower earning starts at 486 and the maximum 833. So you would only be making a contribution on that middle band of earnings. What happens if you don't comply? Well, unfortunately, the regulator takes that really seriously, or fortunately, depending on your point of view. And the regulator seems to have two thought processes in this. People who technically breach, so someone who tries to do it right, but unfortunately makes an error or has not done things in a timely manner, or those who willfully fail to comply. So as you can see from the slide there, the difference in the sanctions levied are quite dramatic depending on which area a business may fall into. And just as an example on there, if you have a technical breach, the chances are that there'd be a fixed penalty notice of £400, which is quite a considerable sum to be faced with. If it escalates or if it doesn't get fixed and it doesn't get put right in a timely manner, then obviously depending on the size of your business, typically if you're a business of 5+, it could be up to £500 a day. As you can see from there, I've just put an example of a recent case that was in the headlines whereby the regulator had to use enforcement, and the business, if you like, concerned was Swindon Town Football Club, and they've facing currently a fine of around about £23,000. So as you can see from those figures, they're not if you like, minuscule. They're not a £50 fine or £60. They are quite considerable. So please, if you're going to set up your scheme independently, if you're going to do this yourself, please ensure that you follow the rules correctly and you ensure that you do things on a timely manner, because I wouldn't want any businesses to be in the situation of Swindon Town or anybody else facing a considerable fine from the regulator. So that's probably given you an idea of auto-enrolment, giving you an idea of what your options are. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about ourselves now, and we are a business, or we are a practice, if you like, that have been operating probably in the background. I've probably got about 112 years of experience within the directors in the business of offering group pension schemes to employers over the last, as I say, 20-30 years. What we commit to do, if we take on a business, if we work together with a business for auto-enrolment, we design, we implement and support automatic enrolment, and we also support the employees within the business. We have strategic relationships with the major financial institutions, and as you can see from the bottom of the screen, that's anywhere from Aegon through to Royal London to Zurich, any institute in the UK that offers automatic enrolment or indeed pension provision on a group basis, we are partnered with them all. We are totally independent, and what we do, we work on behalf of our client, not the pension provider. So if we engage with a business, we take sole responsibility for ensuring the process goes through, and also to ensure that we find the right provider or the right pension company for your individual business. We are professionally indemnified, so if we set a scheme up on behalf of a business and we make a mistake, then we will put that right. We will take full responsibility for that to ensure that we take care of the compliance, any communications from the regulator, any communication from the provider. We take full responsibility for that. We advocate face-to-face advice, so what we do with the companies that we've engaged with, we meet them face-to-face. In most instances, there are occasions and we can't do that, but on most instances we have a face-to-face meeting with the business principal or someone senior in that business and assess what's required. We do a full tailored solution that gives you, as a business principal, as much or as little involvement as you require. Because I really appreciate that you're busy running your businesses, you have many things to contend with. This is something else that you would need to keep your eye on. And some businesses, that's a step too far. What businesses are looking to do is to ensure that this is handed over, if you like, not responsibility totally, because it will always remain within the business, but that someone can do this for us. We offer a simple and straightforward fee structure that's designed to build long-term relationships and support cost efficiency by size, if you like, a scale. I maybe mentioned earlier that we have over 2,000 businesses we currently run auto-enrolment for. We have a dedicated implementation team. We also have dedicated field staff that are professional and competent who would deal with your business in that way. What do we do? Well, it's quite simple really. We have a three-stage process, and we design, we implement and support fully the auto-enrolment process. So that's from gathering initial data from the business, we assess the workforce, if required we review the existing scheme, we provide different options for the business. Because as I said to you, this is a new cost on a business, there are new complications, there's new things to consider. We give their business different modelling options that they can choose. Once we give the options, then we design that solution based on the client's needs, not on the individual, not on the pension provider's needs. Once we've designed that solution, we put a plan in place to ensure that we meet all our key dates, key targets, confirm the pension provider who that may be, have a meeting with the workforce, sit down with the staff and explain exactly what's going to happen, who the provider is, what the contribution levels are going to be, what's going to happen initially, what's going to happen when the contribution rates change, what fund choice are available, what the opt-out process is. We go through absolutely everything that that individual will need to know to make an informed decision. We work closely with payroll. As I said earlier, that we work really closely with Clear Vision. We have a number of joint clients now that we ensure that the data is correct, and obviously Clear Vision take over and then ensure that that's processed in the correct manner and sent off to the pension provider. We then support by doing the compliance declaration, an annual governance review. We do an annual governance review with all our businesses to ensure the provider that we initially chose together or we recommended is the right provider going forward. We provide complete employee support, and we also we take our businesses to the point where they have to do something called automatic enrolment. That basically means is once you've done your staging date, whenever that day may be, 3 years from that date, and they give you leeway of 3 months either way, the regulator, you have to re-enroll all your individuals. So you have to do the process a bit slightly shorter, but you have to do the process in 3 years again, and we take our clients up to that process. So what are fees? Well, as I said to you earlier, we base our fees on a number of factors, and it's usually workforce, geographical location of the business. If we need to do any interpretation, because some of our clients have a lot of people within their business who are from Eastern European or even overseas, from parts of the Commonwealth, we would assess that business and then provide a tailored bespoke quote that would be X amount per month over a 36-month period. Why over 36 months? Well, that falls in line with the date when you have to triennially re-enroll. A service agreement is in place for both parties. However, we both can terminate, or both parties could terminate with a 12-month notice period. We feel that's fair, and that ensures that obviously we deliver what we say we're going to do, and also that there's obviously certain compliance parts that we need to complete and we need to support the business. If that's not forthcoming, then obviously then we would potentially need to terminate that agreement. It hasn't happened yet. Hopefully it won't do, but that's just a little bit of peace of mind for both businesses. And that is auto-enrolment, or as we see it, your guide to auto-enrolment. So I do thank you very much for attending. I thank you very much for listening. And what I would like to do is just go through any questions that have been posed, and I'll try and cover off the best I can. I'm just reading through, and then I'll answer as I've read it, and I'll speak directly. The question was, a small business is, none of my staff are automatically enrolled. So I'm assuming by that they don't meet the criteria based on age or earnings. You will still need to, you still have compliance responsibilities. And the first compliance responsibility you will have is to issue letters to your staff. So they need to have that letter we spoke about earlier that says that auto-enrollment's coming, and although they're not automatically enrolled, they still have the right to join. If you have confirmation that those individuals don't want to join, then what you can do your compliance notification. So you don't have to set a scheme up, so you don't have to have a scheme that's live, but what you will have to do, you still have to do your compliance declaration with the audit process to show that you've issued the letters to your staff and that at your staging date there was no eligible job holders, or there was no one within the business that wished to join the scheme. However, if at a future date any individual wished to join the scheme or indicate it, or you did have an employee who met criteria, then you would have to set a scheme up with immediate effect. So hopefully that's covered off the question. It did say the staging date, I believe, is October this year. So again, we're only a couple of days away. So I would suggest that you issue letters with immediate effect, get that feedback from your staff. Again, please don't get into the realms of offering advice. We'll get that feedback from your either entitled worker or non-eligible, and if that's the case, you can do your compliance declaration, I would suggest, probably in November or December. So I don't think I've received any other questions. Hopefully the presentation gave you an insight of what's required, and hopefully gave you an insight of what your options are. And the way I see things is most businesses I deal with or we deal with can do this themselves. What most people tend to do is either do that in-house, or if the time restraints or the compliance responsibilities, etc., don't work, then they engage with ourselves. So please feel free. Obviously, I believe that Clear Vision will be contacting you shortly, and if you want any further information or you want us to give you a call or indeed come and see your business, we will be more than happy to come out on a one-to-one basis and share with you and provide you with a bespoke plan for auto enrolment services. I think we're just about out of time. So again, just leave it to say now, well, thank you again for your time, much appreciated. Hope the rest of your day goes well, and if we can help or we can be of assistance at all, please feel free to contact us either on the number below or indeed through Clear Vision when they provide further information to you. Thank you very much.